Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Dugan. Happy Friday. Happy Memorial Day weekend. So good to have you all here. No better place to be than with Walton County Development Services and all of our friends. So thank you guys for being here. Again, Sabrina Dugan. I'm with SwiftGov. I'm a managing partner over here. And we're currently contracted to work with Walton County's Development Services to support with automated plan review, so AI plan review, but also to support them with a land development code rewrite, some standardized operating procedures, and supporting them with cross-departmental efficiencies. With that, I have my managing partner, John Merkin, with me as well. We have Development Services Director, Stephen Schoen. He is ready to make change. There's been a lot of moving pieces over the past 10, 20 years, and he's ready to rock and roll and get you guys as involved as you would like to be. So we would appreciate, especially from industry professionals, feel free to tell us your thoughts, your feedback on how we can do better, because at the end of the day, we don't want to hold you up, and we want to support appropriate projects. If you're following the rules, you should get a permit. Obviously, there are certain considerations that we need to take into effect for some environmental features and additional items like scenic corridors, but if a project's compliant, we shouldn't be the ones to hold it up. So with that, we also have the building permit review manager, Donnie Sway. She does a lot of your single family, townhomes, apartment complexes, so all the fun things. To support applicants. She runs that department over there. And her and Steven have been doing some great things, really trying to speed up review turnaround times. So we're going to keep pushing for it because we want you to keep staying and building here. So building the right things here. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just jump in after a brief discussion with this audience. It sounds like you guys are eager to give us your thoughts and feedback and discuss some of your experiences with Walton County and the current land development review procedures, things you might have seen along the way. It'll be a great way for us to get to know you guys more, what you do here in the county, and then also how we can improve some of our processes. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just dive right into the building permit review process with Donnie Sway. And Donnie's, she's been working on transparency and making sure that you guys have materials you need to successfully submit a permit and get it approved.
Hi, my name is Donise. I have oftentimes, every time I stood up, I thank our commissioners for supporting us and what we do, and our partners with SwiftGov to make it easier and we can do our job better in the planning department. So first and foremost, thank you to them for supporting us. The building review process, we've streamlined a few things to make it better. We still have our human element that we're doing, and with our partners with SwiftGov, we're doing the AI review, and that's an internal tool that we use, not for the outside, and that helps us create this standard operating procedure that we've been working on. So all items, with our best checklist that we have are 20 to 30 items that we have to look at. And that doesn't include environmental review, flood zone review, wetland review. So it's just our site plan review that we go through and look at. So AI is our tool to make sure that we don't miss anything. And it gives the appropriate comment back to the land development code as to if this is not correct, this is the section you look at to fix. So when an applicant turns in all the documents that we need, that goes into a review process. It comes into my queue. There are two of us that look at that, make sure that the items are complete, that we have everything, the fees are paid appropriately. Then we make the assignments out to our reviewers. The reviewers, I typically will have 2 in each area so that they become experts of that area. So there's not a delay in someone coming in and having to reinvent the wheel and learn what's happening in that subdivision. Because we have many subdivisions that are, they're a plan unit development, or they're a DRI, or they may have crazy design codes, that they have different setbacks or parking or what. So it's easier for that person to stick with that program rather than someone having to learn it new. We have a lot of different things that we have to look at with design code elements. Alice Beach is very different than Rosemary Beach, very different than, Emerald Bay. So we have to take all of that into account. So the required documents that we have, every application that comes in, when you go in and log in on the InterGov portal, that is still the forward customer portal that you're going to use. So when you go in, you'll have required documents. You'll have the permit application, compliance affidavit, if it's required, elevation certificate, master stormwater plan certificates, proof of ownership, and site plans. You will have detailed plans that you have to turn in. Of course, the site plan with everything on it, elevations, floor plan, roof plan, and a foundation plan. And if you're in certain areas, you may have a wildlife lighting, you may have a beach mouse, you may be in a white sands area, and you may have other flood zone requirements such as a V-zone certificate or non-disclosure or non-enclosure agreement conversion. So on the site plans, sometimes we get site plans that have been hand-drawn, that AI tools can't use that, so we still have to look at that, but the ones that are not, they're CAD-drawn, then we can put them through our AI system to review those. But we do have certain things that have to be on there, a graphic scale, the correct legal description, north arrow, street names, so we have to be able to identify that property as to what we're looking at for reviews. We also look at the zoning to make sure that they are the proper size property for density for what they're going to apply for. The property dimensions have to meet what the deed says, so we're looking at that. That also goes into lot of record. So you can have a legal lot, you can have a lot of record. Lot of record means that it is a property that was recorded with the clerk of court prior to November 1996, that is the same description as it is today. Many times folks will have property that they cull off an acre, cull off a half acre, they're selling it off, or they're splitting a lot. If that wasn't done through our process, and it wasn't done prior to 1996, we don't recognize it. That's a showstopper for your permit. So you'll need to go through the process with us on that. So if it's a legal lot, we can process through, because we can go back and research where that activity was done to make that lot so. If it's a lot of record, we verify that it was prior to 1996 with the clerk of court's records. Another item that we like to have on the site plan is your impervious surface ratio. We have stormwater plans. You may be in a subdivision that has a master stormwater plan. You may be outside of a subdivision that you will have an on-site stormwater plan, or you may have a situation that you need to use the exceptions to the rule for stormwater. That's called our 3 BMP practices, that you're allowed so much of an impact on that property, no fill, and a type of foundation construction is allowed. So on the building details, we always need the finished floor elevation, and we need that for two reasons. One, because you might be in a flood zone, and you have to meet the flood zone requirements for FEMA that the county approves, or you have a 12 inches above the crown of the road that you have to meet for stormwater compliance. Building heights, we have a methodology in Chapter 5 that we review for building heights, and it may be different for a complete ridge line as the whole main height, or a varied roof line. And then you may have one that is on a dune or a beach or a coastal dune area that may have one level at the front of the house and a different level at the back, and there's methodologies for that. Flood zones have to be on there, so we know that what flood zone we're dealing with. It's on the site plan, and then it correlates to the elevation certificates and the way the plans are drawn. Roof overhangs are needed on the plans because the county only allows 18 inches into the setbacks. If you're in a preservation or a certain conservation area, you're not allowed to encroach that overhang at all into that setback or that buffer or the preservation area. So those have to be marked on the plans. We do have some that they draw the square, draw the gazebo, draw the structure, but they don't show us what the setback is. So we need those setbacks shown on there. Typical setbacks are 20 foot on the front, 7.5 on the sides, and 15 to the rear. There are other subdivisions, PUDs, or DRIs that may have separate setbacks. They may have a 5-foot lot line or a 0 lot line with 10 foot between the structures. So we look at that, and according to the plat, how it's positioned on that property. Parking spaces is another item that we look at. If you've been in South Walton, you know it's tight. So when they are designing a house, where parking requirements are 1 per 900 square foot of the house. And staff laughs at me because I'm like, nope, we're not doing a Tokyo drift, where you just draw the box of 9 by 20 for each parking space that's on there and they're lined up in a line. We don't do that. I laugh and say, tell your grandma or your child, your teenager, to park that car that way. It's not gonna happen. So that's what we look at for parking. And you gotta fit parking, stormwater, landscape buffers as that's appropriate, all of that onto that site along with the house. So we like to know that it's actually gonna work. Small car or large car. The other items that we look at are our environmental and overlay zones. So you may have a neighborhood plan, Inlet Beach neighborhood plan, that we look at to make sure it's in compliance, Blue Mountain Beach. We have wetlands that have to be shown on there. We have wildlife lighting documents that have to be turned in, and you have to do your line of sight from the beach to make sure that the turtle lighting is appropriate. Coastal Protection Zone and the CCCL lines have to be shown on those plans, and those are both basically for Gulf Front area and the Coastal Dune Lake Preserve area. Scenic Corridor 38 is a nationally recognized scenic corridor, and we like to keep it that way, and we like to keep it beautiful and a natural environment. So that has to be shown on the site plans, as that's going to be a preservation area. And then we also have, for our other properties next to Eglin, we have the military influence zones. So we look at that for lighting, for heights, and that's in our land development code, so we have to apply that. Most often we have items that are an automatic kickback. Our number one kickback is stormwater. We have folks that give us a master stormwater plan that the numbers might not match accordingly, or that they may want to exceed what that master stormwater was drawn for that particular lot. They want to build a bigger house. They want to put another pool or a gazebo or something that was bigger than what the intended master stormwater plan was for. ISR calculations for the 3 BMPs. A lot of times those don't calculate out. We have to go back and look at that. Parking spaces, as I said before, we don't Tokyo drift, and we got to make sure that they have all the parking spaces they're supposed to on the lot, not in the right of way. ISR calculations go back with stormwater. Finished floor elevations are not always put on the drawings, and we have to verify that. Setbacks are not always dimensioned on there. Like I said, especially in the north end, we may have larger pieces of property. They may have a house and 3 barns, and they're on the other 40 acres, not this one, but they don't have setbacks to show us where they're at, so we have to share that. And then the legal description. Legal descriptions always have, some of them are a less than accept because they've culled off a piece. That's where we have to make sure that that is correct, and that's usually an automatic kickback. That stops the show before you ever get started. Questions about what I just went over? I know it was brief. Okay. Yep. Oh, sorry. We found the pause button on it.
Question is legal descriptions, stormwater, things like that. If a plan comes in from a surveyor or an engineer or an architect with a license, you guys always spend the same time reviewing those things?
We check the math.
And I'm wondering is it seems like sometimes I feel like, and it's always been this way here in Walton County, we didn't encounter this near as much. And the license that we hold is specifically to protect the county, the citizens, everyone. in our professional experience and our insurance and things. Sometimes I feel like we waste some time by trying to double check after the licensed professional. I've always kind of equated to that as if you would, and a lot of times too, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes we get arguments back that you're not right, and we say yes, we are, and we resolve it over time. But it kind of makes me think back to what if you go in for heart surgery and you tell the doctor, wait, before you can perform this, the geologist needs to make sure you're doing your thing right. And that's a little bit demeaning to us that, someone that might not be as experienced as we are in these things are trying to find problems. Very rare occasion they actually do. But how do you guys kind of look at that? Do you just say, if it's got a license on it, don't spend so much time on it? Or is it just pick it all apart no matter what?
If it's a master stormwater plan, then there's a compliance affidavit. So we go back and look at that stormwater plan that was approved for that subdivision. And basically, it's got square footages and then maybe a finished floor elevation that's required, a minimum FFE. So we will go back and look at that. And then the numbers on that form basically says, okay, their building footprint was approved at 3,500 square foot. Okay, what's the house plan going in at? And it's not so much a problem on the house drawing, but it is sometimes a problem when you get to the shed and the pool and all of that, and they don't take into account that that's adding to it if it's outside of that footprint. So that's where we have to go back and check that. For an on-site stormwater plan, those are sent off for review. So we don't get to review those as staff, just get those collected in. For the 3 BMPs, for the exceptions, when you have to calculate that ISR, we're taking that same square footage and running the math of, here's your overall site size, and then you're doing stem wall or you're doing piers or piling, so you either got 40 or 45%, then we will calculate all that up and, oh, you're over, you're under, let's make an adjustment on that.
I guess my question is, if you're asking members of the public to go pay a licensed professional $500, $1,000, why do we spend the time?
And
That's really the question.
I think that's a great point, Curtis. Curtis? Yes, Curtis.
If I could just,
Yes.
just to this topic specifically, so we've had some internal conversations with the admin, with engineering, and we're definitely going to be heading that direction where we're going to be more reliant on that stamp and that certification in the future, figuring out the appropriate way to do it in the right mechanisms in terms of our forms and processes, fitting that in and making sure we're doing it the right way is absolutely on our radar. And that's I don't know that we've come to a place where we're ready to do it all across the board, but we're looking at specific situations where that will be applicable and then going out from there. And I'll just say that I think the way that we're doing it now is because of some bad situations in the past that it just resulted, just that adage, one bad apple, so, but yeah, if we can rely on that certificate, if we could rely on that license, it would absolutely speed up our processes. So
We're moving towards that.
I know too, I don't know if we'll talk about it later, but the House bills,
Not yet.
House bills that are I really hope we get to that. Doesn't happen super often, but on occasion, somebody will come back and question something we've done. I'm like, I'm happy to go through it and spend the time. Somebody else is going to lose our valuable time because of this time we're spending on this. But also, the people that hired us paid us a lot of money to do this, and now they're getting held up weeks like the bad guy, even though we work it out. Normally for stuff like that, no, because I feel like they're getting robbed in this situation, and a lot of times I'll do that kind of work. Sorry, it's just something we deal with. here sometimes. That's right. It pulls us away from the other things we're working on.
You know, I would argue that you're probably an exception, right, to that rule, right? I think most folks that are doing your work are using that as billable hours. But you, again, a bit of a unicorn when it comes to engineers in Walton County. You go out of your way, you do that research, you approach staff with that research so you know, I certainly appreciate it. You're always welcome around our table, but not everybody takes that same approach, right? So,
Well, Curtis, what's his firm name again? Can you say it one more time?
Nautilus Civil Engineers.
Nautilus. All right, Nautilus Civil Engineers. Thank you. That's
We
very
have
helpful.
had some master stormwater plan certificates turned in on a 1960s subdivision that was platted in 1960. So we go back and check to make sure it's still apples and apples and it's appropriate.
Well, Curtis, have you seen this? Because obviously it sounds like Nautilus, although you guys are a local business, you work everywhere, right? Have you seen this in other jurisdictions where they take this into consideration?
Not quite as much as we do here.
Okay.
My experience came from Nashville. It really came from nationwide with bigger firms. Most of my work. No, we never went even near, not even close. I'm kind of used to it now because I think I've been here for 12 years. I've been here probably longer than everybody in the planning department at this point, except maybe one or two others. But
No one can compete with Tim Brown.
yeah, that's right. But you know, it was a culture shock coming here and seeing how difficult and extreme we go on some of these things. But it's kind of
Well,
And-
I actually saw head shaking in the back. Would you like to tell us like your experience with neighboring counties? I would appreciate it. If not, it's okay. You don't have to. Yeah, yeah,
But we live near.
yeah. Thank you. And what was your name? Jody. Well, on this topic, I mean, I think instead what we can just do, because I know for the three of you that were here at our other sessions, I'm not going to make you guys do a whole bunch of surveys again, but maybe we can keep this discussion going. If that's okay with everyone here, just keep it, we will say, just play nice enough with us and each other. That's one thing that I'll say, but other than that, I'll come bring the mic around, and what we'll do is feel free to say your name, your company, how long you've been in the county. Like, let us get to know you too, because that's the only way that I think we're really going to understand how we can start doing things better, is learning from mistakes or bottlenecks that you guys have experienced in the past. So, Tyler, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Tyler Pascal, Arconic Engineering. I've been here about 4 years, done a lot in South Walton, Walton County. I've also experienced in Okaloosa, City of Crestview as well. So counties I can, I'm happy to weigh in on some of that as well. As far as the BPR reviews, I had a couple. One thing that to look into is the impervious surface reductions. Permeable pavement, or like if there's a off-grade wooden deck, there's a manual, the lid manual with the county that says it just 5% reduction, 50% reduction, 75% reduction. Sorry. And I'm not really quite sure where the data on that comes from. It's just kind of said this is what we have to do. In our experience, permeable pavement should be probably considered most like open space or grass. And maybe it's something we can look into, just kind of codifying what a reduction could be that would be more like data driven. Exemptions, stormwater exemptions. Right now, with the exemptions, you have to use a backfilled stem wall structure to get, if you're under 40% impervious, you get stormwater. There's a lot that goes with that exemption, but that's the gist of it. That really isn't much different than a monolithic slab. There are some cases where stem wall slab can be a lot higher than a regular slab, but if you're just, 1-2 block high, it's essentially the same thing as a monolithic slab. So I've talked to some of the reviewers that said if it's a slab, no exemptions. So maybe just look into that a little bit. I think it should be considered basically the same as a backfield stem wall structure, in my opinion.
Are you specifically referring to like a height there? Well, if you're talking about 2 blocks high, you believe that
Well,
should be treated the
The
same?
code doesn't specify, and really it's just they look at the structural plans and said if it shows a backfill stem wall structure, my house is backfill stem wall structure, you only see 1 block high off the ground. And a lot of monolithic slabs could be a 8-inch, 12-inch turn down that from the outside you can't tell if it's a monolithic slab versus a backfill stem wall. So that's where I think the hang up is, what really is the difference there? What was that exemption requirement from? I think you have some history on that. Curtis can follow up on that.
Yeah, as long as you're talking into the mic, we're
Yeah,
good.
sorry.
And no, you're good. I'll kind of
I'm-
casually go like this,
I'm-
like
I'm
make
also
signals.
dealing with little
So,
allergies / cold, so I'm a little worried to hold this thing right now. So
no, you're good. You're good.
sorry for everybody else that pay for medical bills.
Oh, God.
Also, the compliance form I've really struggled with, especially recently since it's moved to, you have the main structure, accessory structure, and a pool, and there's no total. So I'm kind of struggling to fill that out. A lot of the older developments were not done with current stormwater regulations. So it says like max ISR. A lot of the developments didn't specify max ISR. It just calls out a curve number. The compliance form doesn't take that into account, so we end up scratching through it saying uses curve number. I usually make a lot of notes and scratch things out and to what it actually shows. A lot of older developments like watercolor, seaside, it's just a water quality 1 inch times the whole development, so it didn't even take impervious surface really into account at all. So it's difficult to kind of determine those. So yeah, I think we need to rethink the compliance forms too.
And when you're discussing the compliance forms for the water quality times the 1, could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so a lot of the older developments were just a water quality based calculation. Regulations now are based on the actual design storm. A lot of times back then it was just based on, here's your drainage watershed area, and then the pond volume is just a 1/2 inch or 1 inch times that area, and that's what they had to make a volume based off of. Had nothing to do with what size the house was on it or impervious or anything. It didn't really, the calculation didn't take that into account.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Curtis, did you want to add in on that, actually?
Couple things there. The stem wall thing, that thing got misinterpreted somewhere along the way. That came from a meeting with myself and Chance and Anna and Charlie from Public Works. We sat down several years ago and to try to brainstorm, how do we improve these regulations, because we're asking the public to spend way too much time and dollars on these single-family stormwaters, when the reality is a lot of times it's not, the benefit is nowhere near the cost. And we agreed that we should maybe move it up to 45% because probably 75% or more of the developments we were looking at for the size lots we have, once somebody tried to add a patio or a pool, we triggered that 40%, and we were constantly triggering that 40%. So we all agreed that 45% would probably catch most of that. And then we said, well, okay, but let's also think about the stem wall and or the foundations that are not open, and how do we deal with that? So we said, well, okay, well, I guess if you're building up and not filling too much around the parcel, that should count. Somehow that got written into the code as stem wall, but we always intended it on being slabs or stem walls. It was never intended to only be stem wall. And somebody misinterpreted that along the way. And I think we're still misinterpreting to this day, and not when it's literally a 24-inch turn down slab is structurally almost identical to a 24-inch block wall that's filled with concrete. There should be no difference there. That's a simple fix. I mean, really, it could just be language added to the code to fix that.
So you're saying it should be considered, and this is just me kind of trying to digest what you guys are saying. So you're saying that the 24-inch slab should be the same because obviously this is being classified as a stem wall. It should also be considered as a slab, is what you're saying, the language?
Yeah, you can even take that language out and just say an open foundation or enclosed foundation. Make it simple if you want. Don't even use those terminologies. But that's what it was intended. We changed it to say 45% or less of an open foundation will be exempt from having to do stormwater plans. The stormwater can run under the house and infiltrate down there, and so you get a little bit more bang for your buck, as opposed to an enclosed foundation. It can't go under, but we still felt like 40% was still, de minimis in that case, so they should still be exempt. But we kind of messed it up with the interpretation of trying to split out slabs and stem walls. That was never the intent of those. So,
And you
like I
said that was with Chance as well?
Public Works, which is now the engineering department.
Okay.
And the other thing on that one, there's some more stuff we can talk about offline, but there's also been this interpretation that no fill at all when we do those types of foundations. It's actually against Florida building code. The building code requires sloping away from a foundation, a shallow foundation. So my recommendation when we were writing that was that we say you can fill up to a foot or something to create a 5% slope that's required by Florida building code. And that, for whatever reason, didn't get written into the code with it. But have something that's kind of steering people that don't come hire an engineer. The whole intent is to be exempt so they don't have to pay us, are doing something they're not supposed to be doing, which is allowing stormwater to run into a shallow. That was that thing. What was the other topic? Yeah, so the impervious reductions. What's written in the LID? The LID provides another way for people to not have to come pay us engineers. And it's wonderful that that's a thing because there's not enough of us and we're totally overwhelmed, every one of us. So it's great when we can do that. But the way that manual is written right now with the impervious surface ratio, I mean, we've had people interpret permeable pavers as only 90% permeable. Well, I have ASTM tests that we do on these projects with these pavers. I have them literally side by side on one development. On the pavers, on the grass, the sod beside it, and on the dirt that didn't get sod yet. 350 inches an hour on the paver, 60 inches an hour on the grass, 40 inches an hour on the dirt. Why is the paver called 90% impervious when it's 10 times more permeable than the grass? It makes no sense at all. So we need to change that.
And currently, the pavers are being counted as pervious?
Well, a portion of them.
Okay.
And we actually count gravel as like 75% when all gravel is not created equal. It's all different. If you use crushed concrete gravel, I literally ran into this on 30 Camp Creek, which has been under construction forever. The contractor used the permeable paver, but they stuck a number 10 stone in it, which has fines in it. So when it was supposed to get 300 inches an hour, it only got 10 inches an hour. So they had to come and vacuum up every inch of that thing out. all this stuff kind of takes an engineer to understand all of it, but I really feel like when you allow an engineer to look at it that knows what we're talking about, don't say our code doesn't allow it, so you can't do it. Just accept that the engineer has studied this and we know what we're talking about. We test it all the time. So I appreciate what Tyler's saying on that. Like, he's an engineer too. Tyler used to work with me until last year. We ran into this all the time with the code says this, so it overrides your engineering expertise. And we've got to get away from that in Walton County. It's always been a thing here.
That has been a source of contention in my camp for a while. And Stephen alluded to there's some changes coming because it was forcing my folks to become mini engineers, and we are not. And it was frustrating because we can see, because we hear your arguments, and we see that that needs to get changed. It needs to get changed on our end and for y'all. So that this is why we're here.
What if we just based it on like the product, right? All these products have different sheets that come with them that have permeability rates and porosity and things like that. I mean, would that be?
Yeah, yes and no. Like I said, that product that we installed out there, actually the product I spec should have got 900 inches an hour. What they installed was a paver that I'll no longer accept. It was it's manufactured different, open to Phoenix Springs, and I'm making Belgard Oldcastle is throwing that product away and bringing in the new line that works better. This is kind of stuff that we do to try to help all these situations, but the layperson that's using these exemptions has no idea
We don't.
what all this is. So, but that product should have got 900 inches an hour, and it should, in their data is going to say it gets 750 plus, but it didn't. But it did get 300, which is still an order of magnitude higher than the 20 to 60 you're going to get on grass. So I think in those cases, maybe it's if you get an engineer that understands it and can certify a certain rate, accept it for that. I've always kind of contended that we need to be probably just running this ASTM surface permeability test, and if it gets higher than the underlying soil, it's a permeable surface, plain and simple, because that's where most of our permeability is, in the surface. Underneath that concrete that we call 100% impervious is soil, and all we have to do is poke a couple holes in that, and it's not 100% impervious anymore. So if we say we've got a surface that an engineer can certify the surface permeability is equal or higher than the underlying soil, it's a permeable surface. Simple as that.
I would even propose maybe some sort of exemption because of these, with people that are building single family homes, if they're using permeable pavement, it's going to cost them a lot more than just asphalt or concrete. I think that we should consider them potentially having exemption criteria for using the permeable pavement too.
Yeah, you guys are kind of spot on with that. I mean, we've seen that in other jurisdictions, so I'm happy you brought that up. Thank you. We'll dig in, we'll dig into, looking at further clarifying what is permeable and not.
And I think just as part of like an overall sort of conversation as relates to this sort of idea, right? I think there's some confusion on how we treat permeability, ISR, and open space, right? I think a lot of people feel like if it's not open space, then it's pervious, right? Which isn't necessarily the case, and we need to do better to explore
Pools
that.
are considered open space, correct?
Yeah, they are by definition in Chapter 9, which I'll be honest, I think is goofy, but
There's a fix for that as well.
yeah,
Vegetated open space.
vegetative open space, just one
And
word.
There's several other counties and jurisdictions I've worked in. When there's a requirement to preserve vegetation area, it's
Yeah.
vegetated open space. That's what it's counted as. And then pervious and impervious can be man-made products. Like I've got pavers that do 100 times better than the grass does in terms of permeability. So
Sure.
let's try to define permeable surfaces, impermeable surfaces. And when it comes to things like you're trying to preserve a certain amount of vegetated area, let's call it vegetated open space, and that's the requirement.
I like it.
I had another question about the exemptions as well as sometimes I haven't been sure how to steer people as far as if they have a structure that's exemption, it has a required exemption, but if they put a gigantic pool next to it and they're still under their ISR, but they're filling, say, a pool, but the structure, falls under that, everything falls under the 40% exemption. I've been a little confused on how to consider that with them. Maybe you have some input on that.
Typically, what we would do is go back to what the structure foundation is, and then what the improvement is being made to that, whether it be a patio or driveway or what, that it still falls under that 40% or the 45% based off of what that exemption label is for the foundation type. If it's not, then would the 3% de minimis apply to it? That's on a standard situation. If it was over, then they would have to have some type of system that they would propose to catch what that overage is. We've had a lot of them come in for the coastal dune lakes or in coastal A type areas that basically all bets are off. You've got to do some type of an engineered stormwater system to capture that. So we take that into account, but we ask the applicant, what is your foundation system on the house, so that we appropriately apply the 40 or 45 for the new improvement that's coming in.
Make one more comment on the compliance forms. I forgot that Tyler spoke about a minute ago. Another thing that I ran into recently, and actually after some back and forth with Chance on that, Andrew or what, one of them was reviewing it, and I basically did an in-depth review of the old stormwater plans, one of the old crappy stormwater plans that didn't assume near enough impervious surface. But what I found was on most of those old ones, it might say assume 2,000 square foot of impervious, which on our lots is nowhere near enough. It should be 3,500, 4,000 on. But then when you dig deeper into the math, you find out that they actually provided 2 to 3 times more volume in storage than that 200 square foot required. So that's when I go in deep dive, back the math out to figure out how much impervious would that actually serve. That's what I did on some of those. To save those people thousands of dollars from having to do topographic survey, I'm taking work out of my own hands by trying to do this. I'm still charging them the same low rate to do this just to try to save them, because I hate the burden that some of these folks have to go through for something as simple as expanding a pool deck. I have to go pay thousands of dollars in engineering and survey fees to put a couple of feet on a pool deck. So I went through all that effort, and then they kicked it back and said, no, the math says 2,000 square feet. And then I had to explain, no, I backed it all out. We finally got to a point where they agreed, look, your license is on it. As long as you say it's right, it's on you if there's a problem. And gladly, I'll accept it. And we moved on. I'd love, just like I was talking about earlier, I would love us to see us get to that point where when we do all that extra effort, let's just go with it and stop spending so much time and money on these things. Same exact thing happened just about 2 weeks ago. D.R. Horton brought me a spotlight in from, you may have just gotten it recently, from Arsford Plantation. And same thing, they assumed like 2,200 square feet. And I was like, oh no, please don't let this happen again, because I've reviewed their math and backed it out. And that thing would have held 6,000 square foot of impervious on that lot. And they had like 3,500 or so. So I was like, yeah, you're way, way less. So I based on a curve number or something. So I say all that to say is when we do all that work and spend this time and these folks' dollars, let's just go with it and stop.
Curtis, you were saying that it said 2,200 square feet, but it was actually 2,000 square feet, so it was technically still under?
No, the old calculations will say we're assuming 2,000 or 2,200 square feet. And then it'll go further and say we're calculating a runoff coefficient, saying that we need to capture this much rainfall with this runoff coefficient, assuming 2,000 square feet. So therefore, we need 25,000 cubic feet of pond. We've designed a system that has 55,000 cubic feet of pond. And then now this calculation had something even better, which did a check, like a cross check in the math that showed the runoff coefficient that we computed came to 0.4. In fact, it could work all the way up to 0.56 to meet the regulations. So they kind of already did that hard part, and it was a good double check for me. But that's what it is. These calculations, they're so in depth that, reviewers, there's no way they're going to know that. But it's very easy for them to look on there and says, oh, it says 2,200 square feet. They're not going to do that extra effort. But if somebody pays me to do the extra effort, don't put them through hell and make them wait 2 or 3 weeks to go back and forth and solve that.
Thank you.
With the compliance forms as well, something that's been a little difficult is tracking down the development order documents. And sometimes poor Shauna got a lot to do, and I'll have to wait a week or two before I can even fill out a compliance form when these people are ready to start construction. So I don't know if it's even, okay to, ask for if there's a certain database that we can start to drop development order documentation in, or something that we have access to.
Yeah, that is absolutely something we've discussed briefly with SwiftGov, but at admin, we're definitely going to that direction, and we would even like to be able to create some sort of map instrument, or that we'd be able to pull it from some shared file or cloud or whatever we're doing. So, yeah.
Water management has a lot of these stormwater plans and documentation on their website, but sometimes they don't. And then it also a lot of times doesn't reference the county development order site plans or information that sometimes we need to fill these out. So
Where are you currently finding your development order?
I email Shauna and send her the plat
Through
and
our
say, can you
office.
send me the DO? And she emails it back.
Comment on that, we've probably talked to InterGov and CitizenServe at length and some of these things. It was very easy with CitizenServe, and still to this day, I can easily find things if I go in there. Project done during that era. Since you guys don't by default flip it over to the public side on InterGov, we can't get it. So we have to honor to do it. So we got a bottleneck. You guys are aware of it, but InterGov does not default to public facing when things are submitted. CitizenServe always did that. InterGov doesn't. So unless it's our project that we apply to, I can't get the information, and we have to get. We had CitizenServe from
I think it was 17 to 23.
17 to 23. So good era there where we have everything. But after 23, it's somebody here has got to send it to us.
We're aware of that data. A lot of it is still stuck in the CitizenServe system, and then some of it is in EnerGov, and so that's something we recommended as a high priority item, is getting all of that consolidated in one cloud platform, and then it's going to be really easy to make that a lot more accessible.
We also say that we need it easier to search, because on old subdivisions, the parcel number that existed before we platted it is different. So now we can't search it. Searching by name doesn't work out a lot of times. So we default to trying to search by parcel ID is the easiest, but in many cases that parcel number doesn't exist anymore. So
We have built, accumulated all of the subdivisions, development orders, stormwater plans, and any other documents that would pertain to what we do with BPR. We have built those files. That is some of the files that we're talking about extending out to the public to search and view. Anytime that you have a question, if you can't get anything back from Shauna, shoot me an email. Paula monitors my email, so she'll either call you back or email, let me know, and we'll send you the documents that we have in there, especially the numbers.
And how often do you guys normally have to either email Shauna, or would it be helpful to have it all consolidated in one place?
when a lot of them come in at once, sometimes it's almost everything. It's only going to get worse from here because as we're moving away from that 23 time frame. So not been quite as bad when we had everything from 17 through 23, but we're getting to a point where that's going to start getting more difficult to find things.
Thank you.
Anything on that side of the room? You guys have any comments, questions, concerns, gripes? All right. All right. And who are you guys with? What do you do?
Daniel Goff, we're a mobile home dealer, and she handles all my permits. So I think we're the only ones that are not engineers. So we're just gonna be quiet and listen, see what happens. Yeah, I don't know Permio or anything, so we're just trying to listen and see what the best way is to get permits and stuff.
And what's your experience from that side of of
I've
the
actually
county?
gotten a whole lot better lately. She's done it. I think could have been just
When I was just learning stuff, it took, I had stuff kicked back, but here lately, it's been a lot faster.
Okay,
As long
good.
as I give y'all what you need, then it,
That's an important bit for sure. Yeah.
I've been watching as many of these so far that I can, apart from the highly technical, amazing expert advice of these two. I think as a citizen, I'm watching, everything that's being discussed in these and has been discussed. We're thinking about, if I'm not mistaken, the way I understand the process that we're in right now is we've been issued an EA. From that EAR, you're going to come up with the implementation along with SwiftGov. Is that how I understand it?
So yeah, there's a little more to it. So if you have a minute, let me just kind of go through with a little more detail. So the county hired DPZ Co-Design a few years back to do the actual evaluation and appraisal report for the comp plan. They went through that work. The board accepted that report. So I've spent the last, I don't know, year and a half, give or take, trying to move those amendments forward. In the shadow of SB 180, right? So there's a lot of stuff that DPZ recommended that could potentially be considered more burdensome. So what I did was just really kind of highlighted those areas, and I'm bringing it forward. I took it to Planning Commission last month for a workshop. They've instructed me to retool some of it, to look at how we can potentially move away from our current zoning structure and more into what's I guess kind of a status quo with kind of a residential 1, 2, 3 zoning. Redefining some of our other, certainly our conservation residential is posing a lot of issues for both developers and for folks that live in areas that are surrounded by or that are conservation residential. There's a couple other, specifically VMU is always a hot button zoning district. So I'm going to take some time, work through some of those ideas and get that moving forward. Once we get that finalized, that those EAR-based amendments, we'll get them off to the state. And if we get the green light, if we're approved, I really have a feeling we're going to have probably a couple iterations, right? That we're going to send it off. They're going to say, no, we don't like it, and back and forth probably. Hopefully not, but I think that's what's going to happen. Once that's done, we're going to move full bore. We'll be moving in the background with LDC changes in light of that work, but we won't be able to really move those forward until the EAR-based amendments are finalized and approved. I also have some just cleanup stuff going, and we may have even more cleanup stuff going for the LDC in the interim, right, while those other things are happening. So you'll see on next month's agenda for the Planning Commission, there's about 34 pages worth of LDC amendments that are moving forward. A lot of it's just spelling error correction and things like that, but there's some other stuff in there too, and that honestly have some SB 180 concerns as well. Again, I've highlighted those for the sake of the board, for sake of the public. So we'll see what kind of the final product is there, but I think some of them will get through, some of them may not. But that's kind of in a nutshell. If you got anything more on that I can elaborate on, I'm happy to.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Stephen. I think where my observance of this activity and the timeline of it, where I think I think we have to be figuring out how to. My interpretation of DPZ is they're very form based, right?
So, yeah,
and-
in a sense, right? So if you remember, and I don't mean to cut you off, I just want to approach that idea a bit. So during that process, DPZ approached the board and said, hey, here are your three options with this document, right? We can just do a little cleanup. We can go full bore, full form-based code, or we can do this one in the middle. And the board chose the one in the middle, where they kind of added these sort of conceptual ideas, sector plan, place types, these sort of things, but no real form-based language, partly because that's where that language should be in the LDC and not in the comp plan, right? But conceptually, some of those are hard to grasp, even for planners and folks that do that work every day. It's new to Walton County, and that sort of new urbanist idea is just, while Walton County is considered sort of the parent of that idea, it's really only focused in very small portions of the county, right? So it's.
Thank you. I think the point I'm attempting to get to is the more granular of a system we create, the more likely we are to have not gotten it right, therefore prompting additional rezonings of which the public is going to complain about. And so I think there is value in attempting to create, when you do this implementation of residential 1, residential 2, residential 3, we've got to contemplate, are we going to create more unintended consequences by making it more granular, therefore more zoning change requests, or is it going to be allowed that R1 can go to R2 conditionally without approval, right? And my concern is, I think there is an effort to restrict change in our community. Change is inevitable, and I think we have to the DPZ growth zone areas, we have to be willing to accept change in those areas and create a more flexible LDC that allows that to happen without so much really unneeded strife in the community. Whatever you can make that make sense.
No, yeah, I
Stephen,
absolutely understand
I was
that.
wondering, so right
Yep.
now, it has to get approved by planning commission before you can do anything with it? Is this a thing?
Yeah, I mean, we
So-
need an official recommendation by planning commission before
So
we can move
you've
it.
brought this forward to planning commission and you're waiting on their approval?
They gave staff direction to look at some things in more detail, gave a little guidance there, so it's gonna take a little bit of time to bring it back, but I intend to as soon as I can, yeah.
May I also interject on that point? I'm also thoroughly confused as to why unelected, appointed, non-specialists are informing experts on what changes need to be made. So the Planning Commission is not qualified generally to make recommendations that they have made in the 2 workshops I've watched.
Well, they're statutorily, right, required
They're
to be involved in the process, so staff just takes those recommendations into consideration.
I would just my contrarian perspective is they're an advisory body, not in a directive body. And I think my interpretation when I see what has happened, the Board of County Commissioners paid a consultant a tremendous amount of money to provide an expert opinion of which you are qualified to interpret and relay. And my opinion, not necessarily correct, is that the Planning Commission should offer their opinion of your work to put that forth and advise the Board of County Commissioners, but not be able to instruct you to change your interpretation because they are not qualified like you are. However, as citizenry, they should be able to offer opinion to the Board of County Commissioners. That's my take on it, and I find it generally alarming that they have been given so much power to instruct experts and qualified individuals on what the future of our LDC should look like.
I understand.
I have some things that are unrelated to BPR stuff we were talking about earlier. Some of it touches on BPR, but it's really just a generalized thing. One thing was, this was discussed.
Actually, real quick, I don't want to like beat a horse to death, but I do want to kind of casually, it's helpful hearing this from you and Stephen. So Stephen, it's currently required by the state that we have to bring this forward to Planning Commission, but we technically as a county don't have to, not that we would do this, but hypothetically, you don't have to take what they're saying into consideration. You could just take it to get approved by BOCC.
Right. Right. So I could absolutely do that. I could ignore any recommendations or guidance provided, understanding, the sentiment that Uriah just espoused. And there would potentially be some ramifications and repercussions that I would face if I did that, right? So at the board level, I think they would expect that whatever product I brought them forward would have the Planning Commission's at least a positive vote, right? The majority of them would agree with what I presented.
So right now, BOCC has given you the direction that you need to have the support with the Planning Commission in order to bring it towards them for adoption?
Explicitly, no. That it's just what
Is expected
that's
normally.
the situation, right?
Okay.
So if I brought them a product, a piece of work to the board, and I said the Planning Commission recommended denial of this work, it would more than likely result in that work not being approved by the board.
May I?
Absolutely.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, this is why I wanted to say,
Yes.
yeah.
I support you, so I want you to know that. I have a hard time understanding how it is so different than, for example, when Curtis brings an item to the BCC or to the Planning Commission for an advisory vote to approve or deny or provide a condition to, right? So I think it's a structural legislative conflict in my mind that I believe your package should be line item voted on, it should not be an omnibus bill. And in each line item, you do the best with your logic and expertise to provide an outcome. And should they want to line item vote up or down an item with whatever comment, which they are very good at doing, they can issue that comment, of which then you go to the BCC and someone like Curtis may support you in saying, well, it was voted down, but the real world application is X, Y, and Z. And, this is why we need to do this, right? So again, I support you. I support the fact that we've paid somebody, over $1 million to provide us perspective, and to find it being contested at a level, and there are some qualified people on that board, right? So I don't want to say that it's not worth weight, but I think its weight should be opinion of your product that you've put forth. And my thought is that an up or down vote is not necessarily negative or positive. It is simply an advisory piece. And when you take, say, 30 items or whatever to the BCC, if 22 of them are advised to pass and the BCC still has the right to say no to any of those, and they disagree with the planning commission back and forth. At that point, you have the ability to accept 22 or say, hey, you know what, on those other 8, let's go back and work on it again. Stephen, I think, the condition that the planning commission put is something we should workshop. Why don't we go workshop those 8 items, and we bring Curtis back into the room and folks that are really working on it, and go from there. I just have found, I have found the planning commission sort of almost seemingly like executive pressure awkward. And I think a workshop is much better done as a roundtable of the parties involved. And I think they shouldn't be sitting there. They should be sitting here from a weight perspective, offering some opinion if they really want to offer influence on an item. If they want to offer an opinion on an item, they get to sit there. If they want to offer real influence, they should be sitting out here with everybody else, because what are they? Citizenry. And they've gone through no pressure test to suggest otherwise, that they have more weight than, say, Curtis.
Sure.
Is that possible? Could we bring it? Because I believe that's what you guys sometimes do for ordinances, right? You have like the line, and then you have the page, and then you have the number associated with it.
No, not typically. I mean, it's definitely a way to do things, right? To break it down. No, don't be sorry at all. No, that there's definitely value there. So it's something that we could probably consider doing. Yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do is, obviously, SwiftGov, we can only do so much, but also I think this is something that's interesting. And technically, it is a DPZ report, so we're not necessarily affiliated with that, but obviously the county being affiliated with it, that's something we can kind of talk through, especially because it's going to affect the LDC. And I think it would be good to kind of discuss that a little further internally, and then we can try to maybe even discuss at BOCC with the direction you're trying to take with Planning Commission. And I think actually that might be a decent way to approach it with the line item discussion, and maybe we could even bring that up at 26.
Possibly,
we don't have to, but I'm not trying to say anything now, but.
So, and look, the work that DPZ did, to Uriah's point, cost the county a lot of money. So when I was looking through that report and contemplating appropriateness and, weighing my experience and all of those things that one would go through in a comp plan amendment, I came to the realization that the only thing that I could reasonably do was stick to what they presented in that report, and not put my own thoughts into it, really. I mean, there was rare exception, but based on the expenditure and the work that was done, that was the decision I made at the time, just to carry everything forward that was presented, good or bad. I don't agree with everything in that report, but there's some good stuff in there. And when I presented it, I think the text amendments based on that report, a lot of folks were caught off guard by some of the recommendations that I don't think they, certainly DPZ didn't advertise, some of their recommendations, but they were in the report. So it was surprising to some. And that was part of the issue of the lag that we're currently experiencing.
And sorry, you can jump in.
I was going to say, and I think another item that I watched from previous engagements over the last week is somebody said, why not bring DPZ back? And what I might suggest, again, as a citizen, is if you are able to line item them and get the opinion, and maybe you take the ones that everybody approves and move forward, and maybe that workshop, to the point of another citizen, says, we'll bring DPZ in to assist in the facilitation and defense, or a simple phone call. Is Stephen authorized to bill up to 20 hours with DPZ through some calls to make sure that, you know, he's getting these 8 that are in question by everybody, that he's writing them in the manner that DPZ thought that you should. And if DPZ feels strongly about them, then we have that workshop where they're present, they're able to defend and explain. You're able to see it. We're all able to become more informed as to why. And again, experts in the room, which I do not profess to be. This guy's awesome. This guy's awesome. That we execute in a more informed and a more qualified manner. And again, I find it very disjointed that the planning commission has been able to exercise so much executive function from my perspective rather than an advisory position.
I understand. And it makes sense.
Might I add a comment on that? I agree. You probably should just move forward the ones that are acceptable, because I think 75% of them, everybody agreed on, maybe 80% or more.
Yeah.
It was really the VMU and the density. Taking one of those CRs out, we have a bigger issue with CR, but other than taking the CR out, that really wasn't part of it.
Right.
There wasn't a lot that everybody is in disagreement with, so maybe move forward and those other items just line item them.
So, I mean, I think there's more than really that going on, right? During that planning commission meeting, I mean, there were some good topics raised, some good concerns raised. And if I, wholly disagreed with the idea of an R1, R2, R3, or wholly disagreed with the idea that we need to refine our zoning districts or something along those lines, I would be doing just that, right? But I think it merits some consideration on staff's part. I really do. I think our zoning framework could use some assistance, and I think maybe now is the time to do some of that. So
I agree with that. And I think I actually brought it up
You did.
first, and
Yeah.
they agreed with it. But passing the ones through that were acceptable, can you do that and then still continue to pass others later, or you
So I think it would get
do it all at once?
No, we could break it apart, and there would be multiple exercises of taking it to the board, doing the transmittal hearing, and sending off whatever we're doing. It's a cleaner product, and I'm sure the state would probably prefer, and the board would probably prefer that we did it all in one bite. But yeah. I mean, maybe that is a more appropriate thing to do.
I do know we did that in 2018. Part of the reason why some like the VMU, I can't remember it coming up. Like the feedback I got from Kristen on that was problem, but then we have this issue with trying to change things. We're always so hesitant to change things. So piece it as much as you need to move some things through, and then just actively work on it and try to move some stuff forward, because we're never going to get everybody to agree on everything.
Right. And certainly that is not my expectation. I'm not waiting for 100% of the audience and the board to be like, yes, but like I said, there were some points made that I think merit some additional consideration, so.
This is fun. Yeah, this is good. This is good. All right, let's.
We get on that topic?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So a couple things I had noted from the last meeting, but I wasn't in here when the times came up. One thing which touches on what I just said, it stuck with me. Kelly said it. I don't know if she meant to say it, but she said it. She said, we don't get to make the rules, we just enforce them. And that is wrong. The board looks to you guys to make the rules. And over the last several, decade plus I've been working here, one of the things I've consistently seen as a problem is our reluctance to change the rules when we find they're wrong. It takes so much effort and it's all government is that way. We hear it all the time. The federal and state governments are all that way too. Got to change things when we feel like they're wrong. And I hated hearing that. I was like, call it when you say something like out of instinct, but you don't if you thought it through, you didn't really mean it. I think it might have been one of those situations with her.
What I think probably was driving at least that sort of idea is so much of the community pushback where, you know, we're implementing the code, right? And there's a lot of resistance to some of that. And instead of you know, being guided to make those changes that need to be made, we're not. So we're stuck with implementing, you know, code that could use some good changes.
I guess my recommendation would be when we find blatant things that are just wrong, like we're at what, number 8 on this VMU issue on projects we've had to deal with
Thanks,
this
you're right.
problem on. We should have changed this a long time ago and fixed that problem. So that's what I mean. It's like, let's try not to wait years. I mean, this literally came up the first time on Los Rancheros in 2019. Since then, it's happened 8 more times across different engineers and stuff. And now we finally see the problem, but we probably should address it a long time ago. But not
So,
just that one. a lot of
Right.
them.
And I'm just gonna say one thing that I'm really happy about is SwiftGov partnering with us, because allowing my staff and us to use this tool will free us up to do the real work, right? Because we've all been so incredibly busy processing applications that it's hard to take that time away to do that stuff, right?
Actually, and some commissioners past have recommended you need outside consultants to help.
Yeah.
The other things, just on some general things. I think it was Kelly was talking about those forms, and one of them was like you needed a notary to sign the application, attesting that the signatory guy said, "Yeah, I filled it out accurately." That's a waste of time. I don't even have to have a notary for my IRS taxes. I mean, like one example of a lot of examples I might have, like duplicate entry for online apps and paper apps. We do it in development orders, BPR, because you guys like seeing the paper app, as do I. The paper app, I think, is cleaner. But the system asks us to put the same information in. So those are examples of things where I think maybe SwiftGov can help. Let's pinpoint waste of time, things like that. Like, what is the purpose of notarizing a signature that says I filled out the application accurately? I don't know that we need that.
I don't know we do it.
But a
either,
notary is
honestly.
not always available. There's a process to get that. We have one, but
Yeah, I think
not
we've got
everywhere.
5 or 6, but still.
yeah,
it's
but
still,
somebody filling out a
right.
BPR application is not going to have a notary just sitting in the
Right.
house.
Right. But we offer that service, right? So when someone brings in an application, we're quick to be like, oh, hey, Evie, come up here and notarize this thing. But I get what
It's
you're
got to
saying.
be submitted online, so they got to drive to you to do that.
Scan
and then
it
they
in,
gotta drive
right.
back home to scan
Yep.
it in. Those are inconsistencies. Are inefficiencies we just got to get rid of.
Yeah. And just to that point a little bit, I've posed this question to my leadership, and I would really love to go paperless as a department, as paperless as we can anyways. We're always going to have to cater to some folks that don't have the resources to do things electronically, but that is one of my goals for the department.
I'd be okay with that, but you know, your staff members getting let go of that paper or at least that PDF application, it's going to be tough.
It's possible that may be a little bit of a battle.
Just because we talked about the forms briefly, what are your thoughts on the other forms? And I feel a shoe coming my way from Donnie's and Stephen by asking that, but
So one of the things I noticed when I was reading through that form packet was every single one of them's different format and they look different. They're not. There's probably too many of them and they probably can be pared down some. They probably can be put on the same sheet of paper, but instead of having an entire sheet with one line on the top that says, I promise I filled it out accurately, notary stamp, notary public, now it's a 20-page application instead of a 10-page application because we've got all that fluff in there. It's just not needed. So format probably needs to be consistent on everything. And then try to pare them down as much as we can. Duplicate information. We have a lot of duplicate information. One thing I had was we should have clearly defined locations on the online permit documents and applications. For example, like was talked about, half the stuff we do south of the bay doesn't apply to the north, but the online systems makes you wade through every bit of it, no matter if you're north or south. So great thing for these guys. Step one, are you north or south? If you're north, half that stuff goes away. You don't even have to look at it. So let's technology efficiencies there. Something I didn't write down here.
Bye, all. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Oh, the systems themselves, and you're working on it, hopefully with Intergov. Just this yesterday, I noticed, I sent Donise everything. I've been working on this since Intergov was introduced, and I think of my big bullet point list, maybe one thing has gotten addressed. So when that came out, I went to another engineering company, and then put a big list together of what's wrong with Intergov. Tyler and I drove to Defuniak and met with Mac and Steven and the county administrator at the time. And since then, almost nothing has been fixed in that system. I know it's not totally you guys' fault, but we got to push to get that thing fixed. What I discovered yesterday was, for the longest time, it's on my list, we couldn't sort the thing. All the stuff in the system, there's no way, there's a sorting box, but it doesn't work. If you click sort by date, it just doesn't do anything. Well, within the past year or so, something started working where the latest things that got put in the system are up on the top. Like a week ago, it doesn't work anymore. Now we're back to not sorted again. What the heck happened?
They did an
yesterday,
update.
I noticed that.
They just did an
Did
update.
an update, so the whole system's broken again. So I have an application with 50, 60 documents, and the latest thing I submitted is like 2/3 down the page, and there's nowhere to sort it. Like, these inefficiencies are just, we've got to focus on fixing that system to make your lives and our lives effective. Before we do anything with that code, we got to fix that system.
Well, that is going on in the background, right? So we did contract with their EPL, their PACE, program or whatever it is. So, we did spend some money on that. We do have some stuff getting retooled. We got dedicated staff looking at it. So but I mean, I'll be honest, there's some limitations there that we're discovering along the way that it kind of it's bad news, sad news, really. Some of the primary things that we would love to see fixed, that doesn't seem like there's the capability there. So there's just, we've just kind of come to a place where, hey, we've invested in this. We're going to make it work the best that we possibly can until we have the option to do something different.
And if you still have that list, you can send it
Donnie's
our way.
has it.
We're happy to take a look at
I've
that.
sent that list in to about 5 different people over the last 3 years, and plenty
I
of people
would-
have it, but Donnie's was the latest. She just got it last week.
Well,
I
send
would
it
like to be
us.
looped in on
We'll
that
take a look
list.
at that.
We are working with them, I think every week we have a meeting that they work on our problem tickets. What's happened, what's busted, what's this. We've had a lot of that since we've done an update here recently, internally and for the customer side, if we know it. So we'll go back. I'll share that back with Jesus Navarro.
Hopefully we don't get too deep. I know 1,000 got approved to try to fix things, but at some point you can cut the cord. All with Destin, and Destin cut the
Why did they do that?
cord responsive, and they won't fix things. Losses, and they've invested in it. Trying to spend time and money on this, so they cut them.
And the experience was fine cutting them off. Do you know?
Better than Intergov was.
Well, for any list, especially for this group here, if you tag SwiftGov in an email to the county, they'll loop us in. So anytime you are experiencing some things, feel free please do tag us because they'll grab my email and then we'll all be connected. So that'll be helpful.
One thing that I wanted to say, and this is really asking SwiftGov, I put something in that same form that Donnie's had. Inherent bias in government. Feel like we have to find problems. Always been there. It's been there and they almost feel, I've always gotten this, I've been there. I've actually reviewed myself. I've reviewed as a third party engineer and I felt like I had to find a problem. I don't know why it's there, but it's there. And it's almost like you're not doing your job right if you approve an application the first time it comes through. Please try to help them find a way to not feel like that. I don't know how, but it is a thing that's always existed in government. I think from a managerial standpoint, especially with young staff, though they're the most susceptible to this. You've probably seen it. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about. They'll come to you like somebody is screaming in your ear because a young staff member commented on something that makes no sense, and it's a waste of time, and they just don't understand that costs somebody $10,000 in interest because they wasted. Anything you can do, strategies to try for management to try to teach the young staff, and then the consultant has no ways to just try to shift that inherent bias that we have to find problems away to we're here to find problems for the public, find solutions.
Yeah, you're spot on. A lot of our communities, when we start working with them, they do start to tend to lean towards reduction of resubmittals. Normally, our jurisdictions will average around one resubmittal versus the 3 or 4 that I believe a lot of people are experiencing here right now. So that's one thing we're pushing towards. We have some upcoming staff sessions with SwiftGov to go through the new standardized operating procedure, and basically it's saying if you deviate from this, that's incorrect. You must stick with these, and we're also going to be posting that online so that way you guys can have access to it because we understand. I believe there's forms and documents everywhere that it's kind of difficult to find. I mean, you're a frequent flyer, so you'll like breeze through it, you and Tyler and the rest of the gang in here, but that way you guys can start using that because at the end of the day, you guys do follow sometimes rules for the most part. At least this group in here does. From what Steven's told me, this group does. So I think while we're going through those processes, we do expect those, and we're going to ask you guys for those numbers too, as a private company, but also working with government. A lot of our jurisdictions right now, Hernando County, Florida, they have, I believe they receive over 300 single family homes a month. They have a ton of subdivisions. They're around, I believe, I want to say it's 87% of their single family homes get first round approval. So that's huge. And then same thing with the city of Jacksonville. They average around 1 resubmittal, even for large scale projects like commercial projects or subdivisions. And obviously it takes work with community discussions, and we've received some comments and feedback like, hey, why are you even doing these this week? You know, that's a lot of meetings. And yeah, it is, but we need to get some thoughts, some feedback, and get everyone on the same page before we do a lot more complicated things like commercial and subdivisions. And, you know, those are going to be a bit more intensive of a standardized operating procedure, but also we need to get people ready for it. So yeah, we're going to need help with it. Like, we do want to prove those numbers, and we know we can show them. We make sure we do. So, and we do in every jurisdiction. In Walton County, they're next. So
very hard to get them to overcome we have to at least make one.
it's definitely a challenge sometimes. You know, there's staff members, you know, this is AI that's coming into place to support staff as a tool, but a lot of the times they're used to seeing so many plans in their queue that They're like, oh, if I don't have as many plans in my queue, what am I going to do? It's like there's so many seats that are open in the department right now that we need to fill and like actually provide service, which is a human-centric service model. You know, staff needs to communicate with the applicant. They need to communicate with the engineers, the builders. So as their queue starts to go away, sometimes they do get scared. But at the end of the day, like the ones who really embrace the AI technology, they end up growing with the jurisdictions that they're in. Like that's been huge to see. You know, they get promoted and like they really thrive because they're not paper shoving.
And I'm not sure it's the queue that bothers a lot of them. Case in point, one of our most difficult positions right now in reviews is our environmental review here. I don't know the last time one of those has been done. But even with help, that queue is still going to be there, but there still seems to be desire to always come up with something, no matter. I don't know if there's a way to hear that, or maybe it's just a cultural managerial thing. Try to steer that into a situation. It's okay for there not to be anything wrong. It's okay to approve it the first time. Example, something I just submitted a couple weeks ago. Place the 15-inch tree. Citation. Totally unnecessary. I just felt like it was a comment that was made just because I felt like I needed to make a comment.
So in the direction we're going, there's going to be a very standardized like process and review and comments made, and it's not just going to be at the planner's whim per se to make these comments. There's going to be, hey, this is what we're looking at, and this is the resultant comment that's being made, right? So I think some of it's just going to kind of clear up naturally through this process, but I understand. I understand that that sort of ingrained sense of you know, you're trying to find something, and I'm not going to comment on why. And I'm not a psychologist here, but you know, when you're put in that regulatory position, it's just, you know, you're sometimes you're grasping at straws, you know.
Even private sector review engineers.
Yeah.
Happen.
Yeah.
And so help that is definitely always provide the code citation. And really, most places have gone to that. I don't know why. Places went to that a long time ago.
Walton
Yeah.
County will be required
Absolutely,
to give that.
yeah, and it's a
You know it.
it's a
Yeah.
requirement, I think statutorily now, or it
It
will
is.
be come January 1, or I'm not sure when
Yep.
it.
I can't tell
but,
you how many
yeah.
times I've gotten a comment that's literally a question with a question mark at the end.
Yep.
That's a phone call. That's not a comment.
That's true.
The comment
That's true.
takes 2 to 4 weeks to turn around. The phone call takes 2 minutes. So
Right.
let's do that as a phone call.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I guess I wanted a little more information on how this AI implementation to the reviews is
I
going to
can.
work
Agree.
on a day-to-day basis
guys.
with the staff, because I'm not aware of it. So
Yeah, you're good. So as soon as staff receives a plan, they upload it into the AI system to automatically get comments back from our system so they know what to fix or what needs to be fixed. But then staff has the ability to either take that comment and deliver it to the applicant, or they can ignore the comment completely. So they have the final decision as to if the comment's applicable or not. So that's kind of, I don't want to say a quick and easy way of saying it, but yeah.
it's like as soon as an application gets submitted, it gets uploaded to this AI platform like that, or is there still some queuing going on to takes the staff 2 weeks to get it and then uploads it, and then, or is it pretty much automatic?
It's not supposed to be taking 2 weeks for staff to upload it.
No, that's just
When-
me asking
yeah,
the
no,
question. I
that's-
don't.
When they get assigned, the BPR reviewer,
Okay.
now it's not on the development order side of the house, but on the BPR reviews, they automatically take those files and upload them to SwiftGov. So that is running concurrently with what we're doing on the human side.
Okay. So this is BPR and development orders as well.
Development orders is coming, it's not here yet. But BPRs is where we started with the standard operating procedures and partnering with SwiftGov for the AI review.
I am really looking forward to getting it on the development order side, like a lot.
I have an interesting comment as far as code goes. I know that me and Curtis talked about this a lot. He worked in Tennessee, I did in Texas. A lot of developers are allowed to get a clearing permit before development orders. Okay.
Whatever reason, DEP is now taking 3 to 4 weeks to review a sewer application.
That's a huge issue everywhere right now with DEP and sewer applications. I want to say almost all of our jurisdictions are
That
experiencing
shocked
that.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and I actually have been looking at that and toying with some ideas on how we can kind of massage the current language into better serving folks to get in there and see what's on the ground and do their, you know, that work, pre-permitting work and those sort of things, so.
obviously, and we have state stormwater standards, so environmental and, you know, water management, all of that has to be involved too, but where Texas didn't have that, they
Right.
just, you know, go start clearing, but not that it's easy here. But yeah, just want to bring that up just because, you know, time is money. A lot of these people, if they're going to get their development permit eventually, may as well do a little bit of legwork, go ahead and start clearing and then get permits for.
Just to speak a little bit, I think contextually for me, and I didn't mean to cut you off, so I'm sorry,
You're
but
good.
I think part of the driving issue in the south end specifically is the fact that we protect habitat. We have a special habitat. We just don't have like tree counts that we're worried about, you know, so that's
Said with the
where I
environmental
sort of
side
thought that
things,
came
maybe,
from, but
maybe it's a upfront environmental review that you're making sure you're not clearing environmentally protected or
but
habitats
right,
or-
so how do we frame that in a way where we're not saying, hey, you know, property owner, that you're just trying to do a small little development over here. You know, I don't want to get to a place where we're like, hey, you got to go out and get a full, you know, blown environmental survey for, you know, for this little work that you want to do, or for this little clearing you want to do. Even like I get when the DO comes in, you're going to have to do it, but I don't know. There's a balancing act. I'm absolutely welcome to suggestions. I've got your email on unread. I did look at that briefly, but it's something I'm gonna have to come back to because, you know, you give a lot of information to think about, so.
You were talking about a dissertation earlier today, so you said someone sent you like a book or something? Yeah.
This one was probably 4 to 5 paragraphs.
Yeah, it wasn't too long, but it was heavy. There was some stuff to think about.
When a problem comes up and it's fresh on my mind, I want to give all the information when you got time to digest it. So the specific thing was what Tyler just talked about is almost everywhere provides a way to do either, we call it either an early grading permit or a grading permit. And then you have a final grading permit or an infrastructure permit. And it's common everywhere in the country for infrastructure development projects. And you've probably seen it in certain places. We don't have that here. And we did actually used to allow this it was back when I first moved here is about the time that we stopped doing it. But the holdup a lot of times is the DEP water and sewer permits. And we took this stance that until every state permit is in hand, so the state preempts you from stopping a development order review, but they don't preempt you from stopping construction from starting. So I almost felt like it was a tactic at one point in our history to just slow things down. But now with costs the way they have become, and I'm going to give you all that detailed information on the costs on CR and why it's not going to work anymore. But all these costs that keeps driving inflation, that's one of them. When we have a critical path item that's water and sewer that doesn't actually come until 3 to 6 months after construction starts, but you say we can't actually start construction until the permit for that is in hand. The reason our developers are waiting is because, unlike most places in the country, regional utilities is one of the worst, and Freeport has gotten this way. They want impact fees now. Sometimes that's $1 million to $2 million. They don't want to pay that until they're ready to pay that. So then we get stuck in this critical path where we push all the construction down the line and drive up the interest costs, we drive up the cost of development, lots cost more, it keeps going up. So if we can find ways to fast track some things it helps us substantially. That 13 lot subdivision I've got sitting on Don Bishop, the contractor was ready to go the first week of March. And here we are almost at the end of May. Regional just sent me that signed application last night. It took 3 months because they're busy. There's no reason, but we're sitting here and not moving that project forward. Every other permit in hand, except for that, but we can't start construction because we have a policy that says we don't start until those water and sewer permits are in place. So, ultimately,
I mean, but some of that, right, is to protect that interest, right, the developer, right? So if at least that's what I assume sometimes when I think about it, right? So if we give the green light, developer goes, and then all of a sudden regional comes back 3 months later when they would issue that permit and they don't like it and some redesign has to occur, then, I mean, couldn't that result in some additional cost?
It's at-risk grading, so they understand that when they start, that they could do a lot of work clearing and grubbing and not be able to move the project forward, and they understand that.
Okay, so we're not talking about vertical, we're not talking about construction, we're talking
No.
about clearing.
it's the
Oh.
same type of thing as the preliminary plat law now. They're
Okay.
doing this at risk, and they understand that things
Right.
can go wrong.
Right.
And we'll have to deal with that. But we're talking about, for that, it's a water and sewer permit. They've got and regional may ask us to move something somewhere, add
Right.
a hydrant, do these little things. But, for 3 months, we could be doing that while the contractor's working on retaining walls and mass grading and pond excavation and storm drains and all this stuff. But we're not letting them get started until the other thing.
Sure.
And for no other reason other than, Andy, who reviews things, was out for a little while on vacation, and they had to let their attorney review the easements on this property, so that took 2 weeks. So you got a whole entire industry on hold for something that we can fix tomorrow if we just change the policy. I don't even know if it's written in the code. It might just be a policy.
Oh, look, I don't know.
We'll go and check it out.
Yeah, typically the clearing and the grading takes the longest out of the phases, so you allow them to start hoping that whenever they're done with that, they can start to move on to utilities and pavement after that. So it just kind of helps them process a little bit, get started earlier.
Sure. Welcome, Commissioner Curry. Believe it or not, we actually had, almost 10 people in here at one point? So that was
I promise. I
yeah.
took pictures. Yeah.
Hey,
Oh,
all right.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
We weren't sure. We
Yeah.
weren't sure if we should go and visit or, and then they all started flowing in, then they flew out. So, but we still have these two hanging in strong. We actually got some interesting feedback. So,
Absolutely.
I would say this session was probably, you can't have favorites, but this was an insightful one.
It was definitely insightful. Yes. I've appreciated tonight quite a bit.
One more thing I want to bring up, Stephen, I know that you're aware of last year when we started I started a replat that's still ongoing because an access easement wasn't allowed. So they had to replat this person's property into a subdivision that had frontage. He also owned a lot in that subdivision that had
Right,
frontage.
right.
Okay. Access easement wasn't allowed. There's been a couple times too where it would have been nice and a lot easier just to have an access easement versus a replat. And then also the replat, I guess, just the way that you have to go through that process right now with the DO first. I mean, I've had, I guess, 2 replats that have taken a year because of that process. And I just want to see if there's any sort of efficiencies, or we could look at that again about how to, it's 2 lots that they want to either combine or shift a lot line 10 feet. And here we are a year down the road and it's still hanging them up. So obviously each one has its own nuances, but,
Right.
that's kind of 2 separate things in one there. One access easement, so once your input on that, and then also the replat process.
Yeah, I think the ones specifically that were the access easement was probably an alternative. I think there was some consideration there, some worry initially, but okay, well, we're going to allow this guy to access through, but he's going to turn around and allow someone to build a home on here. He's going to do so some of that sort of just worry, right? That we're going to let someone do something and it's going to bite us in the butt, right? I think some of that drives.
Have you
some
seen
of these-
that before?
I've personally never seen that. I know it's not that uncommon, but it was, it was something unusual, I think, for us. So I think we treated it in the hardest way that we could. And I think we do that just naturally, right? So, oh, this is weird. We're going to make this go through the whole gamut here instead of maybe thinking about it a little harder and figuring out there's a better solution.
Which was a minor DO and a replat. So it
Yeah.
took a long time, still
Right.
taking a long time. So yeah, just something to bring up, like to look into that. So access easements, are you allowing some at this point, or is it case by case? Is it?
You mean through like an existing platted lot like that?
Yes.
I don't know. Again, this one situation that I think you're talking about, it's the only one that I've seen since I've been here. So I don't know that there's enough for us to say, okay, well, let's rethink our policy here, our standards here. I think there's probably a path forward, especially if we start seeing more of these where folks are trying to utilize a platted lot for access to an outside lot. We'll have to come up with something more efficient than, this 1.5 year long process. So, but if you have ideas, we're all ears right now. So
I'm sure Curtis has seen something somewhere.
Brought this up, just more of a high level thing is, we always have traditionally looked at things here as minor DOs, major DOs. We have a less than minor. We don't use it near as much as we used to. Before you joined here, we used to use less than minor common. I don't know why we got away from that, but and addendums, so addendums, I was very happy there was some cases where you said, all right, let's do it as addendum, but everywhere else in America I've worked, if you have minor changes, especially during construction, you don't waste time with a review process.
yeah,
Like a big thorough review process. Right now, we did the building size adjustment on Hidden Pine. They added 2 inches onto the width of the units. It wasn't a big deal.
right.
We're gonna have another one, but the same project, the owner was able to talk to the radio tower owner to say, hey, I can't get that unit that I wanted with that extra 5 foot of depth because of my setback. So I want to shift that lot line. I've got an opportunity to buy that. Well, Tim told me you got to do a minor development order to just go buy 10 feet from the neighbor for a project that really is not proposing anything other than to move the setback. I feel like we've got to maybe try to find a way to define minor things more minor than, because a minor development order here is 4 months. Not minor, it's 4 months of review.
Right. And
That's
less than minors can be that long as well.
Well, I've been trying to get a cul-de-sac in Sandestin since January, and it didn't get reviewed, and because there's no internal deadlines, those things slip through the cracks.
That is a problem, especially with staff turnover. Was that maybe one of Eric's or something?
Bob is helping to kind of speed that up, but I say that to say when you're looking at this, let's maybe try to get some better clarity on what constitutes a less than minor and a minor and all that, and put a better process in place so that you're not the only one. I've got a less than minor in the Freeport right now for 10 parking spaces that I submitted in January. Parking spaces.
Well, let me ask you something, just because it's something that we have thought about internally, specifically with my DO staff in terms of TRC. Would it be more efficient from your perspective to not put minor or just DO applications on the first available TRC, but stretch it for 45 days?
We should not be going to a public meeting for TRC. No one else in America goes to a public meeting.
Well, I don't disagree with that at all. This is working here, coming here was my first experience for an actual meeting for TRC, but I mean, that's the cards we were dealt, is the way I've treated it instead of thinking about
It wasn't
pulling it.
that. Well, it was a public meeting before Mac took over. It was a public meeting, but it was a roundtable public meeting is the way they always handle. Didn't sit at the dais and do this back and forth. I watched the TRC from a couple days ago, actually, when it was like this back and forth question and answer. It's
Yeah.
like, this should have been solved with a phone call, and it's like in this public setting at the dais, and we're voting, all is in favor, aye. That's not what technical reviews are. Anywhere in the country, they don't do them that way.
Right.
The technical members that understand this sit around and figure out what's right and what's wrong, usually in a conference room somewhere. Now, it can still be done in the public setting, and the
Yeah.
public can still be there, but it doesn't need to be this back and forth and voting. I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah. There's,
It's causing, and the problem is it causes these weeks long of advertising and posting. Wasn't for this being the only place in America that does it, I would say maybe it's
Yeah.
especially too, we get in, I can't tell you the last time I had a project that was approved on the first TRC. We used to do that all the time for the first round, but now that this became common practice that we continue almost every project, which means play. And don't need to do that. We can do that with addressing this with staff. And if you want to take some public comments, then do, but don't bring it back to the meeting. We don't need to.
Yeah.
I know that in Okaloosa, there's not a minor or major. It's all internal review, and then once you've satisfied all their comments after 2 or 3 months, they post a sign on the property so that the public's aware. And if they have 7 days to make to contest it, and basically say they have to provide a code citation saying that this project doesn't meet, and that it's accurate, then they have to go vetting to discuss it. But mostly internal.
yeah, I mean, that's been my experience. Like I said, prior to this, it was very much more, out of that public facing sort of atmosphere. And there was that kind of, period where the public had an opportunity to, to provide some feedback, but it was generally at this level, it wasn't so in depth, I guess, or not in depth. That's not the right word to use, but yeah.
But as far as the lesson minor versus minor, I think I don't think it's in the code, but they've just basically, the planner's been saying if it adds density, intensity, or impervious surface, then it's a minor.
Yeah, there is.
I saw, I think the Ace Hardware, they added a gas tank and did a minor DO for that.
Yeah, there's definitely a tendency to use the LTM where that may not be the most appropriate thing. And again, I think it's just that sort of we've gotten to this place, I think, as staff where the public has enough of a say, I guess, if you will, not a say, but it's very easy for us to get beat up, right? So when something comes through and it's like we don't want to make that decision, even if it's black and white, we're like, oh well, let's bring this to the board. Let's make this a more heavy review, right? So it's and it's just we've been conditioned in many ways. And while I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, it's definitely a time constraint, and it definitely costs
It is, and
folks money.
it brings it into a lot of groupthink, in my opinion, where
It can,
it's a lot
absolutely.
of opinions and
Yeah.
emotional arguments behind, when it's really just supposed to be, does this meet code or does
Right.
it not?
And I think that's really where our partnership is going to help straighten some things out. Yes, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of going to come back to stats. You're right. Is this following the code? Is there a code citation? If there's a code citation, then yes, it should be brought to attention. It should be notified and the applicant should comply. But if there's no code citation, then that's something that personal biases shouldn't get in the way of an applicant getting a permit if they're compliant with the code. Obviously, there might be some type of interpretation, and that's really what staff's role is going to be, is if there is interpretation needed, to come in and support the applicant with the human-centric model that they're going to have. And that's the role that staff is going to take. And we're also hoping with like these sessions, we've working with communities in 60,000 in population, 1.65 million, you see a lot of different types of interaction with the community. And we've always been very, yes, we love working with the community, getting thoughts and feedback, but also it has been really interesting to see the lack of respect from some, like this group. This has been great. Like, this is wrapping up the week pretty well for us, I'd say, but I've seen some in just it's wrong, the way that sometimes staff gets treated, and leadership and BOCC, like, we need to protect our staff because it's hard to get them, it's hard to keep them. And I think we've seen a big shift with BOCC saying, hey, no, these are our staff members, we're partners, we're in this together, like, we're making change for good. And in order to do that, like, we're all starting to align. Obviously, Stephen is newer to this role, but he is ready to start making some aggressive changes. And when I say aggressive changes, I think it's changes for good. Things haven't. There's been a lot of things that have been going on here for years, maybe. But if we are able to standardize processes, we want to. We are starting with the BPR process, just because it's kind of the highest volume. Like, we needed to
Absolutely.
start there, support those staff members with a better knowledge base to help them with their reviews and make appropriate decisions and feel confident with it. Because that's another thing is, it's great seeing, I think, some of the confidence that this has been bringing them. Obviously, there might still be a, hey, we received this back from SwiftGov, we do have some questions or comments, but that's when they can spend some more time on those applications too that might have a few more unique situations. So then staff can make the right decision on if it should be approved or denied. So I do think that the county, especially, I'm hoping that the community sees that the Planning Department and Development Services is trying to make a huge effort with outreach. And, as fun as 12 community roundtables are, more than 6 hours each, and the 2 hours that people stay and hang out after, they're so fun. You can't get enough of this guy. And it's just, we are trying to put our best foot forward to show, like, we don't mind talking, but it's just like getting some of the community to do that respectfully, I think will be a process. And obviously, Walton County needs to do everything they can to keep staff. Like, we have some good ones here. We need to, gosh dang it, keep them. And if they're not happy, it's going to be hard to do that. And that's just going to make things way slower. And then we're going to start from ground zero again.
And let me.
Wait.
And you did too. We had a conversation earlier today in the office, and we didn't get in this predicament yesterday. This has been something that's probably been needed 15 years ago before we started getting to where we're at now. It's easy to fix a problem when it's that big. When it's this big, it's very hard. And when you were saying the back and forth and all that with the TRC, you might throw the chair at me, but I like having public input and public hearings. Not all the time, if it's going to be something that could be fixed and it's very minor, I get what you're saying. But interpretation is kind of the issue. I mean, that's why I've sit in here at TRC meetings, and I've sit in here and watched attorneys going back and forth, and what they're going back and forth about is interpretation. It's what they say versus what he says or she says. That's, to me, that's a big problem because there's too much gray. And that's what we talked about today. I mean, how much easier would it be if these folks got in here and said, well, nope, can't do it. It's right here. Sorry. Next. Or, hey, yep, you can do it right here, instead of, well, we okayed it last week and it for this person, and now this, well, you have to go before the ZBA, or it's just an outlet, boss. Let's try and fix this. But I think it's all about interpretation. It's all about communication. There's a lot of shuns in here that we need to do. I applaud these meetings. I mean, I don't care if it's one person in here or 50 people in here. This needed to be done 15, 20 years ago, or maybe we would be Okaloosa County. Wouldn't be doing some of these minor things. I don't know. But this is a place that we finally said, stop kicking the can. Bring people in here. Let's all get together and let's hash this out. Because if we don't hash it out, the state's going to hash it out. You know, you look at all these bills that are landing right now. You know, we don't know what we're going to look at. We spent $900,000 on what, DPZ? How much can we do of DPZ? 30%, 40%, maybe 50%. I don't know. So,
We can probably do a little bit more, but there's definitely some stuff that's gonna raise some flags. There's no doubt.
Well, I think that leads back to like the transparency that you and BOCC have been bringing forward. You know, how can we fix the land development code appropriately, make sure we have enough community involvement? I'd say these roundtables were great hit, you know, and starting that process, making sure we do have enough community involvement. We will be following up with a survey after to continue to support those efforts. And then hopefully we can start making it a bit more simplified, because obviously why do we need so many regulations or forms, or, you know, if a project's compliant, it's following rules, like it should be very black and white. So I think that's going to lead to more efforts in the communication that we're trying to have with the department and then with the public.
They already have a hard enough problem dealing with the land development code and the comprehensive plan that we have now. And now you have the state coming in dictating what we can and can't do. So now you got that added into it. You don't know what bills are going to be passed next week. You don't know what state representatives are going to vote on next week. And that's going to change your position and what you do almost on a monthly basis. I mean, we got the damn Live Local coming on the agenda. There's another one. If you read into that, that's all right. Well, now we got that SB 180. We got all these, you know, people making decisions on our county that don't even live here. We have 2 representatives. We're people from Dade County representatives, Hillsborough County, Hardy County. All these counties are making decisions that affect Walton County and affect you. And I have a problem with that. I really do. So.
Well, especially like, sorry, one last thing, Curtis, but especially with your local jurisdiction code, obviously there's unique standards to your code that are only applicable to Walton County. So I thank you for mentioning that. Sorry, Curtis.
I don't know. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, it'll fling you. Like, sorry.
I think last time I tried to use this one, it was on and off. I just wanted to close with one last thing, which was, I think you touched on something. You touched on the groupthink has. Yeah, I've observed this since I moved here 15 or so years ago, and the groupthink has actually hurt us, I think, quite a bit here, and we see it in social media a lot too. You know, are a lot of control there, and it happens a lot, but. The biggest problem that I see with that is when we do like technical review, as I do, sometimes those meetings will spiral on for an hour or more of talking about things that aren't even technical. And I don't know if we can find another way to do that. But as you said too, with the state laws, you know, House Bill 927 and 803 now. I don't know how we're going to pull it off, but there's not a choice, which basically says the county has got to establish a database of private sector workers that can review projects as they're initially created, and then you have 45 days to approve them. And there's no way that we can hold TRC meetings that have to be advertised 2 weeks in advance and continue them to the next TRC meeting because 3 weeks, because we have gotten into this groove of, well, if every single T is not checked, we need to continue it and advertise it again. There's so much loss in efficiency, and it's not just us. It's frustrating to us, but staff members, you've got dedicated staff that's dealing with those advertisings and things. And sometimes it's just totally unwarranted. So we're going to have to find ways to make that efficient. Now there's not an option. It's state mandated. I think we can take that as an opportunity to maybe fix it for everything, even quasi-judicial, which won't have that tight time frame. We can maybe fix the efficiency on that there, and it'll carry over to the quasi. But I think the overarching thing of all this, I'm glad you all are here as an outside party looking in, because I've been here so long. I used to bring even fresher ideas because I've been all over the country practicing everywhere, but now that I've been here for 12, 15 years, it's hard to remember them. But you guys are fresh and you're intimate and you're seeing it all. So now you can bring these outside ideas and bring them in and says, this is how it works everywhere else. It works great. And it's so hard to change. One of the reasons it's so hard to change, what Stephen just talked about a minute ago, is there's always this hesitancy because they take such a browbeating from the public, which ends up getting back to screaming at the BCC. And it creates this friction all around in this circle. And we need to try to find a way to work out of that, work our way out. And as an outside group coming in, you can, I hope, help to create that. They're reluctant to change because of the public, who's probably more involved than they should be sometimes, who screams at the BCC, who has to get voted by those same members. It's just creating this circle of friction that we need to try to work our way out of.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the comment. You know, we're going to do our best. Obviously, we can't necessarily, we're going to receive as much public comment as possible when making decisions, especially towards the land development code rewrite. But at the end of the day, you know, the decisions will probably bring forward towards BOCC, Planning Commission. It's going to be based on the facts and what we're finding as appropriate for the county. So to protect the county long term and to support the citizens in appropriate growth, you know, that's huge. So we thank you guys for being here. I mean, if there's any more comments, Tyler, Commissioner Curry. I didn't believe it. But no, we appreciate you guys being here because this is, I think this also encourages not just staff, it encourages SwiftGov into like seeing that you guys care and you are here to support staff as well. So I think that's just going to continue to bridge things. It's going to take some time and it's going to take all of us in our efforts with BIA and, you know, all the different groups around. So including all the community groups as well, would love to get them involved, but also having that respect towards staff, which that's the big thing is, you know, starting to create that dialogue. And I know administration especially is going to start taking some initiative to really communicate to the audience, hey, this is my staff. If you're not respectful, you're out of here. So, and the same thing with BOCC. That's just, we need to start creating that atmosphere to where staff does feel supported, and they are starting to. I mean, it's cool seeing people show up to meetings, and it's been really nice. You know, every commissioner took time to do a roundtable in their district, and some of them went to more than one that wasn't in their district. So we're really appreciative for that, and I hope that's going to provide more opportunity for the community to also connect with them and see that we are a community in one Walton, not just north, south, and Freeport. So, thank you guys. Last minute words?